Where does consciousness fit in, Faye?
I don't know whether I was hoping you would ask me that or hoping that you wouldn't ask me that. Yeah, so I wrote a paper about consciousness, which surprised me. It was, I didn't expect that.
Well, you mean to say you didn't expect to start writing the paper on consciousness, or you just were surprised when you wrote it at the end? Oh, there's a paper on consciousness here.
Somehow it just was there and hadn't been there before. I know I was surprised that I found that I had something to say about it. So that was what was unexpected. And I found that I had something to say about it because it struck me that the framing of one of the central debates that I see going on or witness going on just from the outside, I'm not party to these debates, about consciousness.
Sure.
Was very, very similar to a debate about the nature of the passage of time, which I am more. I mean, again, I'm not a philosopher, so I'm not part of the community of philosophers of time who talk about these things. But I do talk to such philosophers and participate in meetings on the nature of time as a physicist. So it struck me that the same debate, sort of central, what I consider to be the sort of a central debate, was really happening in both these two arenas. And I have come to the conclusion, or at least let me say, I would like to propose or put out there for people to think about that they're the same debate.
The debate on consciousness and the debate on time is the same one?
Yes.
And sorry, just a moment. When you say the debate on time, are you referring to the arrow of time or something else?
Something else. So the question of whether the passage of time is an illusion or whether it's physically real.
I see. Okay, now you're going to have to justify why are those two the same.
Okay, so that is a debate, I claim, in the philosophy of time. So I can find you some thinkers who come down on one side or the other. But the debate that I noticed happening in philosophy of mind, let's call it, I suppose, or philosophy of consciousness, was the question of whether consciousness is real or an illusion. I think a misapprehension or there's some misunderstanding about it that means that there's no hard problem of consciousness. So either there's a hard problem of consciousness or there isn't, because consciousness is somehow not what you think it is, or it's an illusion in some way.
Sure.
And that's this, I claim, mirrors the debate about the nature of the passage of time. So either the passage of time is real, physically real, and not accommodated within our current physics, let's say, or it's an illusion. It's something to do with psychology or something that doesn't, there's nothing to explain. There's no physical passage of time. And I claim they're the same debate.
I don't want to spoil the punchline, but it has something to do with a process versus a state, if I'm not mistaken. If I am mistaken, correct my mistake, please.
So I'd like to contrast not process and state, but rather process and event.
Sure.
So I want to make the distinction, which seems kind of pedantic or foolish or just a sort of...
Well, pedantic distinctions is 95% of philosophy. So you're well in the philosophical domain.
I'd like to make a clear distinction between an event and the occurrence of an event. An event is something you can write down on a piece of paper. It's something that it's like it's like saying rain in London between noon and 1 p.m. yesterday. So I think that's an event. But the occurrence of the event is a dynamical process. And that's true of all events. So I want to encompass this discussion in the first instance, or I'd like to locate it in the first instance within general relativity. So
okay.
So which is great because the language of general relativity is all about events, space-time events, the event of this podcast,
yes.
The event of your breakfast this morning. So that's it. It's something which has a space-time substrate.
Yes, and I don't see process in that, at least in the general relativistic description.
So in the general relativistic description, there is no process. There's just events. That's right.
I see.
So when you go discrete, so now let's move the debate or the discussion, let's move the discussion from general relativity to the deeper theory, in other words, causal set theory, or let's say the speculative proposed deep theory, causal set theory. Mm-hmm. Now, every event is made of these discrete, finitely many discrete atomic events. And I propose that the process of the happening of the event, which is made of these atomic events, the process of the happening, the occurrence of that event, is the coming into being of those individual atomic events in what Raphael Sorkin calls a birth process. So it's a process. So for each event, each atomic event, each space-time atom, it's not there, and then it is there. So it's born. And that's that process of the birth of these space-time atoms.
I see.
All of them together, that's the occurrence of the event.
Is that a mathematical statement, or is that the interpretation of the math?
I'm not sure. It's maybe you can tell me. There's a twist here, which is kind of crucial to this proposal that this has anything to do with consciousness now, which is that, so an event, I claim, this non-dynamical thing, this, your breakfast this morning, can be fully laid out, written down, pictures drawn of it on a piece of paper, and it can be shared. You can do it. You can lay it out, maybe mathematically, and you can hand it to me, and I can hand it to you. We can talk about it. We can do physics using these descriptions of events. But they're just events.
So to use some continental philosophy words, there's just being but not becoming.
Yes, that would be a reasonable. I like that. Okay. The becoming, or in other words, the occurrence of an event, is the birth of the space-time atoms that comprise that event. But that birth process cannot be captured objectively externally, not even in a movie. And the reason is that the atomic events that comprise the event of your breakfast, they are partially ordered. So that means that some of the atomic events have no order.
There's no relation between them.
There's no causal relation between them. And there's no fact of the matter about whether this one happens before this one or this one happens before that one. They're just not ordered. There is no order in which they happen. But that makes it very difficult to conceive of this process actually happening dynamically, because when you imagine this birth process, at least when I imagine, maybe you can, when you imagine this birth process, there are these atomic events. Think of them as little dots. So the dots are they're appearing. But if it's a dynamical process, then they're appearing kind of one by one. But then the two atomic events which are not ordered cannot appear one before the other. Because there is no order in which they appear. They don't come into being in an order. They're unordered.
If you enjoyed this toe clipping, then the full video is linked in the description. You should also sign up for Toe Mail, which is again in the description and the pinned comment. You'll receive immediate access to all exclusive updates from the Theories of Everything podcast. It also helps me communicate directly with the core toe community. You'll also receive my top 10 toes. Think of it as the intellectual version of Quentin Tarantino's Obsession.